I appreciate everyone joining today. Love to have you here, and thank you for the time. Today, we're going to talk about freight order execution, and I'm really excited to walk you through this new innovation that we've come out with, and a little bit explain how this relates to how you as our customers are using this, using the platform today, how this might affect you, and how you can leverage this actually really easily. I'll walk you through all of that. Um, if I haven't had a chance to meet any of you, my name's Jacob. I head our solutions group here at Cleo. My team is primarily responsible for understanding our customers' businesses, our processes, challenges, use cases, the things that you do as a business, and make sure that our platform solves those things, and we can find outcomes that help you achieve some of the goals that you're gearing towards. So what I want to do today is I want to walk you through, like I said, our freight order execution capabilities. I'm sure some of you have looked at some of our materials, so I won't go through all the 101 stuff. I want to walk you through, in particular, since a lot of you already use our platform, walk you through how this works, who it's for, some of the specifics of what it actually does for you as a customer, and then, like I said, the ability to turn this on. What's cool is this is really just a natural extension of our integration capabilities. So for you to turn this on is a really straightforward exercise, and we've had some of our early adopter customers already getting value out of this in a matter of just a couple of days once this is all set up and configured. So let's jump in. Real quick housekeeping. Everybody is on mute. So if you do have any questions, any comments, any thoughts, there's a little Q&A button in the bottom. If you can't find it, you might be able to throw it in the chat as well. But I would love if anybody has any questions, pose them. I will, at the end of the webinar here, try to walk through and answer some of the questions that come up. Admittedly, some of them might either be a little deeper than I can answer quickly, or they might just need a little follow-on. So worst case, if you ask a question, we might reach back out and ask for a little more detail, but would love to field any questions that you have. Okay, so first of all, I want to start really quick and just kind of level set on our conceptual view of the supply chain space, and where I think a lot of you are leveraging our platform today is in particular in the data movement and integration space. Really, the kind of bottom two, the foundational layers here with data sources and integration layer and capabilities that we need to be able to integrate your business processes seamlessly and really well. Cleo's done that for a long, long time. Most of you, like I said, are taking advantage of that today, and hopefully the platform is running your core business processes in a really reliable fashion. What we found is that certainly with the changing dynamics of global supply chain, the more stringent requirements that are forced upon you, especially from your shippers, brokers, your customers, really. We found that there's an additional level of scrutiny and usability that needs to come with the platform, and especially with AI really not only accelerating all of the progress in the space, but opening up new avenues for us to help customers realize some of the outcomes of the platform. What we've done is we've basically taken those foundational layers of data movement, data integration, and layered on some additional components. The main crux of this is really this context layer that we built out our supply chain orchestration data model under the hood that basically allows us to start giving you better business processes. So today, where you might be handling things like load tenders and invoices and all the associated processes through our platform, it's one thing to be able to transact and integrate those to and from a TMS, for example. It's a very different thing for us to be able to model that and contextualize that information so that you can actually get some insight out of it. And in particular, then being able to provide things like better orchestration capabilities. How do you manage the flow of these freight orders, for example? How do you look for potential issues in these processes before they come up? How do we go back and scorecard against performance over time? And how do we let our teams converse with the data model as well to tease additional insights and more systemic information out of this. And where this is all going ultimately is, again, really feeding your teams with better, more actionable insights. And in particular, being able to then do things like agentic extension. So your teams being able to leverage some of our agentic capabilities for things like issue resolution or things like troubleshooting a process that might have a problem to it that needs a little more evaluation, that maybe instead of just dropping it in your team's lap, we can help do a little more insightful evaluation before we get it to you. So the main point here is the platform that you use today is the same platform that we're talking about here. Really, all we're doing with freight order orchestration is we're building some additional context as part of the platform, and then providing better outcomes that you can start leveraging day one. So what this looks like conceptually is something like this, where most of you today, for anybody who's a customer, you are set up in kind of this fashion conceptually. Right side are partners. These could be your shippers, brokers, they might be retailers, they might be manufacturers, they might be distributors, whoever you're doing business with on the right-hand side of this diagram. And on the left-hand side are your core business systems. I think primarily for this group, we're talking about different TMS integrations, but frankly, these integrations could go to a number of different applications behind the scenes. Again, foundationally, that's what we've done for a long time for our customers. And the processes that you run through the platform are really your core B2B processes. Things like, in this space, again, load tenders, responses, status updates, invoicing, rate confirmation details, appointment scheduling. You guys can read the notes in here, but the point is that all of those core business processes are already running through our platform. And really the only kind of core requirement to light up freight order execution is to have these things inside of our platform. If we don't have them in the platform, we today don't have visibility into that. We aim to fix that over time. But today, when we have these processes running through the platform, we have visibility into these core flows and these core integrations. And it allows us to start giving your teams better, more insightful information. One example would be things like proactive early warning signals. If our platform, if our data model anticipates that there's a problem with one of your shipments, for example, or that there's status update requirements that you have to adhere to, or that there's response commitments that you have to achieve, or that we see things that aren't failures, but we see a downturn in volume from specific customers. We can start alerting on those things and getting that in your team's hands so you can take action on those before they actually cause problems and avoid a lot of these challenges in the first place. That's what I'll show today when we get into the demo. So really quickly on the freight order execution side, a little more detail on kind of the what, who, how, and why. So very specifically what this is. So freight order execution, like I said, is really an additional layer of visibility and proactive early warning signals that we can provide using the already integrated processes that you have in our platform. And specifically today, the primary way of communicating these different processes is using EDI. Primarily, it's not 100%, but generally we find that most of our customers are using EDI as really the kind of structural standard of how these processes are accomplished. And so what we do, and who actually fits in here today, primarily for EDI driven processes. If you're an asset-based carrier, if you're a 3PL with a trucking arm, if you're providing freight services for some of your shippers and customers, and you're transacting these EDI type processes, this is something you could light up tomorrow and start giving more better, insightful information out of the platform. These again are just use the existing integrations. There's not necessarily any refactoring we have to do. There's not any rebuilding, reestablishing partner integrations. That stuff doesn't have to happen. We can use the existing integrations and simply turn on some of the additional insights that we provide as part of this freight order execution component. So it's going to take the current data that's already flying through the platform and use that going forward to, again, build its model and provide you better, more insightful information. The cool thing is it actually also looks back on your data, because you have retention policies in our cloud already. So we can actually look back on that data and build regression models over it as well. So even in terms of things like looking for doing a trended analysis of volume over time as a baseline example. We can look back, say, like a year, and build a very detailed model of expected volumes. And if we see deviations from that, we can start alerting your teams. Again, I'll show that in just a moment, but it's a nice way to sort of leverage the existing framework that's already set up in the platform. It was super light touch to turn this on, and then just simply be able to realize some of the outcomes that are given as part of this. And it's a fairly unique thing to Cleo because, well, one, look, we don't aim to replace your systems of record. Your TMS is your TMS. Leverage your TMS and your system of record for what it is, and it's a core business system that we still have to facilitate to and from. That doesn't go away. Your RTTVP platforms, those will stay as well. A lot of your shippers will simply require those, and we'll have to provide those integrations as well. But the cool thing is, because we kind of sit in between all these different applications and we have visibility to these processes, we can alert you, especially well ahead of time before issues occur. And especially if you have visibility gaps within these systems or across these different systems. So if your TMS doesn't provide some level of analytics that you're looking for, it doesn't provide insights that you're trying to get out of your relationships. If your RGTVP platforms take the ELD information but don't really do anything useful for you, you're just kind of reporting the news. Cleo's goal is to be a lot more proactive in these relationships and look for not only model these processes over time so you can have better visibility, cleaner process orchestration as part of the visibility that we're providing in the platform. I'll show that in just a second. But in particular, alert your team so that they can take action before issues become problems. And the real key there is, again, your people are incredibly important. They know the business. They know all the nuance of managing these freight orders on a day-to-day basis. My goal is not to replace them. My goal is to provide them more detailed information, more actionable early warning signals so that they can be much more effective at proactively resolving these issues. So again, you'll see that in just a second. So let's talk a little bit about the impact here. I think it's really key for us to understand what we're trying to address. And one of the metrics that we hear customers talk about all the time are detention, dwell time, penalties basically that are incurred because we have breakdowns in our delivery processes. Now, I'm well aware a lot of times detention is not 100% your problem. Sometimes this is caused by a DC or a loading dock or a scheduling appointment issue. Regardless of the problem, you guys are on the hook for paying these detention fees. And typically, and I'll talk about this in a second, typically we find that these are not actually recoupable. And this is a massive problem, both in terms of lost productivity, but also direct cost fines that are incurred because of detention fees that come back to you. The cost of a trailer per week, $500 on average, detention. Again, that could go up, could go down depending on who you're doing business with. But the key here is that, yeah, this is not a small amount of money that we're talking about. This adds up very quickly, especially for those of you with a large fleet. Typically we see that kind of 2-hour allowed window without before incurring detention fees. But we're almost 40% of deliveries are seeing some kind of a detention fine. That's a problem that we need to solve for. Now, the key is that that's just one aspect of margin leakage, and I think the thing that sometimes we lose sight of is the freight business is not a super high margin business. So any type of margin erosion cuts your profits, your margins that you guys are measured on tremendously, and it's a huge impact to the business. So again, whether we're cutting down things like detention fees or we're reducing the amount of time that your teams need to spend troubleshooting and resolving issues that pop up, if we can be proactive about these things, it will help us to reduce the amount of effort, and frankly, it lets us put our people on more productive things rather than just playing whack-a-mole trying to solve problems. The other one too is misload. So especially in the spot market, if you're doing any kind of spot loads. If you miss those loads, that's a major detraction for the business, because now it's not just a matter of margin decreases. We're actually just simply decreasing the amount of revenue that we're getting from customers. And I think it's important for us to also keep an eye on the fact that it's not just these direct costs. It's also a bunch of these downstream issues that stem from this. So things like if we habitually fail to respond to a spot tender, for example, or if we consistently miss our commitments, things like status update consistency, sequencing of status updates, invoice accuracy, all the little bits and bytes that make up the integrations to and from your partners. If we miss those, that adds up, and you end up being deprioritized. You end up getting less, fewer loads from those shippers, and we see that that becomes a really big downstream impact when you start just simply seeing less business. Now, that's one actually that we want to pick off and look for that type of downturn. I'll talk about this with our anomaly detection as part of the freight order execution component. If we can start looking for those anomalous activity of, hey, we normally see this amount of tenders, for example, from a shipper, and I'm seeing 80% of that this week. We should notify you of that so you don't realize a month, 6 months down the road that you've just simply lost business from some of your top customers. Again, if we have consistent enough and habitual enough problems, we'll lose those customers flat out. There's this trend in the market right now where shippers are looking to find more consistency and build partnerships, and not actually a trend right now, but we're seeing kind of a consistent performance there where folks are looking for partners in this space that they know will help them achieve their SLAs, their commitments that they're required to meet on their business side as well. And frankly, if we can't meet those requirements, again, we will lose that business, we'll lose the account altogether. We've seen cases where some of our customers feel like they have good performance and their scorecards look good. Their customers come back and say, actually, ours looks remarkably different. And by the way, we're severing the business. So maybe worst case scenario, but we do want to make sure that we are solving for these problems and not being habitual offenders, because that does lead to some massive downstream issues. And of course, things like access to free cash. If we're not if we're reducing margin and we're having issues with actually getting paid the amount that we're supposed to, it impacts a lot of the cash flow. And frankly, we're seeing still a lot of turmoil in a lot of the carrier space, with folks exiting the market, closing their doors, all these things. So we need to make sure that we are keeping the business healthy, and in particular these B2B relationships. They're critical to making sure that the business's processing is normal. And it's not so much that carriers are losing on price and on service. Those things factor in, no question. But normally what we see is that it's this long-term performance that impacts these relationships, and ultimately puts folks behind. And especially if you have projections on margin, on revenue, and we miss those things, that causes real issues with the health of the business. Now, a lot of this stems from the fact that there are so many touch points in any kind of a freight order process. And so again, I'm not going to go through all this in detail. You guys know your business better than I do. But point is, there are a lot of different things that could go wrong with even just in the core of this load tendering and shipment process. And this is just kind of showing a core process here between load tender inbound 204 and 210 invoice on the outbound side. If I fail to respond to the load tender, I miss the business. If I fail to set the correct appointment, I'm going to end up with likely penalties and potentially detention as part of that. If I fail to be on time for pickup, I get dinged on compliance. If I dwell too long, I get charged detention fees. If I have delays in transit, then I need to tell my shipper about that. And if I don't have visibility into what's actually happening, and if I don't send them consistent enough updates, I'm dinged. All of those things add up as both relationship and penalties and short pays as part of that shipment as well. Um, Delivery on time, invoice accuracy and timeliness, reconciliation of the payments to make sure that what we actually billed for is what we got paid, and there's all these discrepancies that come along with that, and especially if there's inaccuracies that I as the carrier am having issues with, then yeah, I'm gonna have additional fines there too, because not only do my team have to go dig up and figure out what's actually happening, but my customer is having to do the same thing. And in a lot of cases, they again either from a customer satisfaction or an actual billing issue, they're going to start fining me for those things too. And then same thing, looking for volumes. If I don't have visibility into the sort of trended volume, maybe you get some of that from your TMS today, great. If you don't, then this is problematic because I can't trend the business activity over time. And again, something that we can provide. And the point here is that we can help with most of these things. We can start providing proactive early warning signals for most of these issues, even today, even in the current iteration of the freight order execution capabilities. The goal is that we can make your team more effective. And like I said, part of this is visibility. Part of this is having the ability to natural language converse with the data model. I'll show all that in a second. But more importantly, I think are these early warning signals that we can get in your team's hands to avoid these issues in the first place. So that's really the crux of this, is because we understand the context, because we understand the process flows, and because we have that data that's already running through our platform, we can be the kind of leading indicator of, hey, there might be a problem here. Your team should take a look at it. We see that a truck has been at a certain location for an hour and a half, and we know that there's a detention fee that starts after 2 hours. We shouldn't just wait until we get charged a detention fee. We should tell your dispatcher about that, so that they can take action and make sure that the truck is moving. If we see that that a load tender has come in and we haven't responded to it, it's a spot quote. If I see a load tender come in and I need to respond to it within 1 hour and we're 45 minutes through, tell somebody about it so that we can take action. We don't miss the load. If we see that there's an appointment scheduled that's 8 hours from the current location for the equipment that's supposed to be there, and it's an 8 hour trip to get there, and that it's an 8 hour window before the appointment, I need to tell somebody to say, get that truck on the road. Otherwise, we're going to likely fail to have an on-time arrival for that appointment as well. So again, all those different touch points, because we understand the context of these processes, we can tell your team about it. They don't have to go look at the TMS and the RTTVP and their spreadsheets and emails and all the other data sources that they have to manage. The key is if we can give your teams these early warning signals, they can prevent most of these failures and end up, again, kind of protecting a lot of that margin and a lot of the long-term partnerships that you've worked so hard to build. So that's my preamble. I wanted to kind of set the stage and get you a sense for how all of this works and some of the things that we're trying to achieve for you as our customers. Let me show how this looks in a demo. So give me just a second. Let me flip over to my browser, make sure I'm still logged in. Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about a couple things. So the way that this works is, and most of you are familiar with our Cleo Integration Cloud. I'll come back over here really quick. This might look the same, might look just a little bit different, but the way that we present all the data and the way that our platform works is that we're, again, handling all the integrations under the hood. Any of these different processes are flying through us. We're receiving load tenders, we're sending invoices, status updates, all the different touch points of these processes. We want to present, kind of at a glance visibility with these dashboards, along with actual detailed insights into these different processes. So if I look at, say, like an inbound load tender report here, I can see every one of my tenders that's been received. I can see all the different partners that I'm transacting with. I can view the history of these different processes. Most of you have this today. this process here where we're taking all the different transactions, we're kind of linking them together, teasing out some information. This is a great way to kind of manage these different freight orders and these processes, so I can see statuses of what's actually happened, what status updates I've transacted, invoice that's been generated, all those fun things. The only problem here is that it's transaction based. And so there's a linkage between these different processes, but not necessarily a linkage between the actual order and fulfillment itself. So what we've done is we've kind of shifted this. And again, this still exists. Your EDI teams can still leverage all of this, but what you can turn on is this orchestration tab. And in the orchestration tab, what we do is we understand the context of each of these freight orders. So for example, if I come into one of these here, let's do this one, this at-risk one, cool. So if I come into this freight order, whoops, and I look at this one, we haven't fulfilled this yet. This one looks like, in fact, I'm late on this one, so I have an on-time freight order response at risk. I never actually responded to this. So what's interesting is we'll track the actual freight order itself. We'll track the pickup location, any delivery locations, any updates in between, any kind of freight order load tender, any kind of acknowledgement. All these different things are really kind of consolidated together, and then we summarize the key points of each of these different deliveries and allow you to kind of see the progression through these. And what's really important is that as we see potential gaps, so something like this is at-risk on-time freight order response, this tells my team, hey, in this case, it's overdue by a couple of days. That's a problem. Now, we would have gotten a notification about this ahead of time so we could jump in and take action. But this lets me see not only what is at risk currently, along with what's actually failed, what's been missed. We can set thresholds for those things to manage these over time. And if I show one here that maybe has a little more detail, so this in transit one down here, perfect. So I can see here that looks like I've picked up from this location. I've completed delivery here, and I'm in transit now to my last location. And this one doesn't necessarily have any issues tied to it. I can see all the kind of history of what's been happening. I can see the different status updates that have been processed as part of this. And the key is that if any of these are missed, this generates notifications. So if I come back here really quick and let me go like this. So what we see looks something like this. This is just an email example that I get. This one says the transportation status has not been delivered. So there's a delivery status update that we're looking for. In this case, it'd be a D1 status that we say, all right, look and see whether this has actually been delivered. And if we fail that commitment, or if they were at risk of failing that commitment, tell my team about it, so that I don't have to wait until I realize, oh, actually we're an hour late for that delivery. I should probably call the location that my truck is en route to and let them know. I can take action ahead of time. My dispatcher can call them and reschedule the appointment. Maybe we need to, look at the next couple of steps down the road to say, well, actually, we need to swap in different equipment for this potentially. So again, more proactive alerting lets your teams take action to go fix these things. That's what your people are doing today. They're firefighting. They're having a bunch of heroics that manage these things on a day-to-day basis to try to keep things running as smooth as possible. And the key for me is the more information, the more proactive alerting them, and the more time, the advanced warning we can give them, the better they can be at their job. And so, we want to model all this to make it kind of easily viewable and see what's actually happening here. But this would all be notifications to your team. You saw an email that I showed just a second ago. It doesn't have to be email. If you wanted, we have some customers of ours that are building different agents to help kind of disseminate different notifications and use our early warning signals to figure out how do we route that? How do we, assign priority? We can work with you to figure out the right way to get it in your team's hands. The other thing here to note, and it's not just about viewing the actual order itself. Again, it's all the criteria around this. We can start understanding and tracking the particular partners that you are most interested in. So if there are certain shippers that look not enough volume or too infrequent, or it's too kind of scattered to really put a firm tracking around it, then we don't need to send in alerts and early warning signals for those types of freight processes. For your top partners, we can turn these on. We can track the ones that you're interested in. We can track the specific lanes that you're interested in because, again, we know pickup, drop off location. We understand the context of these processes. So you can actually do this by down to the actual lane itself if you want to. You can just turn everything on if you prefer, but you can get very granular with this if you'd like. We can turn on and off specific notifications. So if something like on-time delivery, you say, you know what, we've got that. Our TMS gives us everything we need, turn it off. You don't need to leverage that. But frankly, it's an additional signal that I think adds a little more fidelity into your visibility so that if we see things like, again, on-time delivery at risk, and we can mark it at risk with a certain threshold here to say, well, if I've got, if I'm about 10% left in my normal delivery time for that particular lane, tell me about it. Maybe it's 25% because I need a little extra time. You configure how proactive these alerts should be. Same thing for dwell time. Before I get charged detention fees, tell me about it proactively so that I can take action to avoid that in the first place and get the truck moving, get it prioritized, get it unloaded, get it loaded, get whatever the next step is in its journey. Your dispatchers, your coordinators can help with that as long as they have those early warning signals in their hands. And then similarly, things like freight order responses. For contract, this is less of an issue, of course, but for spot, it's really important that we not only respond to these load tenders, but respond in a timely manner. There are windows that if we don't respond to it, we're going to miss that load entirely. We lose the business, we get deprioritized, somebody else gets that, typically at a higher price than we were even quoted as well. So what's cool is I can actually set, again, a threshold here to tell me, we look at the respond by date within the document itself. If it's not there, we can set some defaults. But the cool thing is that, yeah, we can look at all of these different statuses and communicated details as part of this process and start getting that, not only understanding that in terms of our dashboard, but also then factoring that into the visibility and the proactive alerting that we provide as well. The other side of this is anomaly detection. So when I want to look at not just, let me click off this for a second. Did I confirm, right, 204, 990, did I confirm these on time? We track that, of course. We want to make sure that we proactively alert and that we can track performance of that. Something like anomaly detection of, hey, am I receiving the number of load tenders that I should typically receive on a day like today, on a Thursday in late August? It's tough to look for exceptions there because they're not really failures. If everything's processing through and I'm still doing load tenders with that partner, it's tough for us to otherwise trap that as a failure. I'm going to kind of bounce back to my other tenant here just to show this one because I have some better data in here. But if I look for anomalies in here, in particular, I can look for things, certain dock types. And in this case, I'm going to look for load tender activity. And if I see in this case a drop in volume for my partner Tractor Supply here, this is one that you can see. Hopefully, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see this. Now, in this case, I've set the threshold really low, meaning in this case, it's a deviation of less than one. But you can kind of see how this works. We build a trend of activity over time, and this is a partner I only set up a few weeks ago. But we build the volume trend over time, and then we can start alerting your teams to any kind of anomalous activity, either unexpected increases or decreases. In this case, I have this BASF example where I don't have enough. I expect 12 load tenders from them, and I've gotten 0. Now, maybe that's one you'd spot in the TMS, but again, use us because we have an additional layer of visibility, and we know truly what's been transacted between you and your partners. So even if, and I'm going to flip the example for a second, even if you're sending invoices and your TMS believes that you generated the invoice on time, you correctly delivered it out to whatever external system, we're the ones that are responsible for it. So we maybe picked up that invoice and tried to deliver it to the shipper, and it was rejected for some reason. The TMS doesn't know that. We do. And so the key for us, again, is because we have that clear view of what's actually being transacted, and we can look for things like non-exception based issues that would creep up. This gives us the ability to start again having proactive alerting that comes out of the system to tell your team, hey, there's something that is anomalous in this case. Take a look at it. So it's a really nice way to have again additional warning signals produced by the system so that your teams can just be more effective and more consistent in managing these flows day to day. The other one that I want to show really quick is status update, and in particular, some of the sequencing and some of the consistency and frequency of these. So the other side of this, you'll notice, and actually, sorry, I'm jumping around just a little bit. I want to use the data where I have it. So I'm going to show you one here. Here, perfect example. Okay, this one has a pickup and a drop-off location. So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. And what you're going to see here is that we track not just the original load tender, any kind of accept, reject. We track all the status updates in between, any kind of arrived, pickup, drop off, completed loading, in transit, really any of the steps and any of the status codes that you might send to your shippers. We track all of those that are actually transacted. And so we have a clear view, number one, that we are sending these and that we're sending them on the right consistent time frame that's needed depending on the contract. And the cool thing for us is because we have that visibility, we can start alerting to a lack of consistency. So and we've seen some cases where it's every 15, maybe every 5 minutes that in transit I need to send updates. We can make sure that that's happening, not only to schedule those business processes, but to make sure that we're tracking that performance over time. And things like we have some of our customers, maybe some of you live this, where if you have maybe a more legacy application, and this is not a dig at any systems, TMW in particular, we've seen this with where there's a lot of batch processing, AS400 based applications where there's just batch, the nature of those processes is very batch oriented. That's okay, but it does mean that we have to put a little more rigor around those processes, because if you start sending a bunch of out of sequence status updates to your shipper, it's going to cause some downstream problems. So for us, we can not only track that we're sending these in sequence, but we can also start doing things like if you need us to, we can even put it into the business process logic, some checks to make sure that we are actually sequencing these correctly and not just reporting that we did or didn't, but actually making sure that as the documents are going out the door, that we're not sending them out of order. So we've got some options for you depending on some of the complexity that you see on the status update side. The other one that I want to show quickly, and again, when I talk about the data model, what's really under the hood is us understanding primarily today these X12 structures. X12 is just so structured that it makes it possible for us to actually understand some of the context and detail, even though there's a million different varieties of it. But what's cool is because we start contextualizing the transactions, we can not only show it in a better visible way, a better way to kind of track and see this in a dashboard and produce all these alerts and things like that. What we can also do is give your teams access to converse with the system in a human language way. This is the promise of large language model. And in fact, what we've done here is we leverage a small language model so that there's less hallucination and it's much more trained on the supply chain data that we're specifically analyzing. And you can kind of do whatever you want in here as long as it's part of the data model. You can query it. We've got a bunch of pre-canned prompts that you can leverage here. So for example, if I want to look at stop complexity by partner, if I want to kind of use this pre-canned prompt to tell me which partners are the most complex, build a report basically that shows me some of my compliance with these higher complexity partners. And so the cool thing is you can dictate how this information is analyzed, how it's produced. If you want an executive summary of some of this, if you want different graphs and charts, if you want to schedule this so that it's a report that's generated on some frequent basis, you can do all of that. The data model lets us basically expose this in a conversational way. And for anybody who's coming to Cleo Connect, we'll actually preview some of this. Otherwise, there's some other things coming down the road in terms of like MCP access and things for folks who have an agentic and otherwise AI strategy internally that we want to allow you to kind of parse some of this data out as well, consume some of these insights, and let your teams, merge this in with some of your other pipelines. Having a standalone BI tool is fine and it's great. Like we should feed data in there, but we should also be able to produce insights out of the information that we have. And again, the data model that we've produced lets us do that automatically. And by just simply turning on the freight order execution capabilities, we get access to all of these things day one. So I think that's most of what I wanted to cover. Honestly, there's a whole bunch of usable proactive alerts, better visibility, the ability to converse with this and be able to understand the different kind of moving parts of the freight order process. I think is the real key is again letting your team just be more effective and consistent at how they're managing these core business processes day to day. Okay, so let me flip back and I wanted to go through one more thing. So like I said before, to actually light this up is a really straightforward process. So for anybody who is an existing customer, your integrations running through CIC will actually serve as the foundation for freight order execution. So we can simply just turn this on top of your tenant to basically get some of these additional insights out of the platform automatically. There's a little bit of tailoring that you'll want to do so that we're not sending a huge amount of false positives. We're not notifying on every possible deviation so that you can set some thresholds that you manage to internally. So there's a little bit of configuration that goes into this up front and that our teams will help you set up. And then as soon as that's configured, you can start, using some of the proactive signals that we can produce, some of the, insightful visibility, the conversational AI that I showed just a moment ago. All of that's available right from the start once this is set up and configured. So the short version is, and I want to run a little bit of Q&A here, but the short version is for anybody who is kind of interested to explore this further, and if anybody has any kind of separate questions for any customers, reach out to your account teams. And for anybody who's not a current customer, you can of course send a note to sales@cleo.com and we're happy to engage. And let me just pull up here. I've got a little bit of I saw a couple of questions come in. Give me just a moment. Okay. One was about my screen. It looks like that resolved itself, which is good. Okay, so I did see one here around multiple TMS applications and integrations that are set up. Short version is, yeah, we don't so much care about what systems and how many integrations are configured. Even if you're running multiple TMSs, even if there's some processes that are integrated to a TMS and some that are integrated to a separate finance application, not a problem. As long as the signals are running through our platform and primarily it's those the EDI transactions from your shippers and brokers, then yeah, we can key off of all that data. It feeds into the data model automatically. There's also a question around FourKites here. And I'm going to expand this a little bit because I've seen customers ask for, around like Project44, MacroPoint, a bunch of different tools that you likely use today, either that you use internally or that are required by some of your shippers. The question is, are we meant to replace that? And the answer is no, we definitely are not trying to replace those applications. However, we want to provide your teams information so that they can leverage the tooling in a better way. So we have similar access to those different RTTVP type applications. We can see statuses. We can see the progression of a load through its life cycle. And for us, yeah, we want you to keep using those systems. If we're integrated to those, keep using those. If you have other systems that are integrated to those applications, it might at some point make sense to leverage our tool. Otherwise, we have some other options in the future to kind of tease out that information and add it for more fidelity into our data model. But even today, like I said, had for us to be able to produce to track the delivery information and then produce some of those insights for your team. That's the goal, is to not replace those systems, not replace your TMS, not replace your your visibility platforms, but really just give you more information, more proactive alerting as these core business processes are being executed. There was a question around what types of does this apply to LTL? Does it apply to full truckload? Short answer is yes, across the board. Like I talked about, the in some cases, like especially for spot or anytime we have any kind of real negotiation that has to happen as part of the tendering and response process, we provide some additional insights there. But even for contract and for full truckload, yeah, all of those are supported and fit into the data model really well. And then again, as soon as the load starts actually moving, all of those different status updates that we start tracking just gives us more information that we can start looking for potential issues along the way, regardless of the freight type. And then the other question that so I'm gonna have to come back to one more in a second. There was a question around some of the anomalies and the notifications that we're sending. How I'm paraphrasing here. So, are we sending notifications for every potential gotcha? Are we going to cry wolf a bunch? I think is the best way for me to summarize it. And the answer is no, but primarily because we can tune these configurations. So again, this is not a one size fits all. There's a lot of automated processing that we do within the platform to look for things like must respond by, must ship by, deliver by dates within a load tender. In some cases, those either aren't provided or they are not always reliable. And so we can actually set some thresholds and overrides in cases where you have a different set of requirements you want to track. So again, all this is really kind of tunable within your environment and for your particular relationships and really the way that you run your business. That's really one of the value adds for Cleo in general, is that you don't have to just kind of leverage our tooling as is. We mold to your business. So same thing on the notification side, making sure that that these are configured appropriately. There was another question here around notifications by partner, which is a really good caveat. So yes is the answer. So the notifications by default will include kind of all the detail associated. What type of notification, what type of exception we're potentially seeing, the document types that make that up, along with actual partner information. And so in some cases, we can just build simple email rules, frankly. In other cases, we've had some customers and I would be glad to work with you that want a little more advanced notification type process where a small little agent can help us do a lot in terms of making sure that the right notifications get to the right teams, weed out some of the noise potentially if there's just some, there's a missed status update because the truck was out of cell service, for example. Well, if we have one miss, that's not really necessarily something that the team needs to go fix. But if we see 3 or 4 or 10 in a row, that's a real problem. So those types of things where we can look at the kind of broader picture, and again, agents help us do that in a very automated way. We can also do things like using those agents provided like a Teams or Slack notification. So yeah, we can do all kinds of interesting escalation and dissemination depending on how your teams want to consume that data. So yeah, great question. We can definitely do different types of notifications by different trading partners. Okay, so the other couple questions that are in here, I'm actually going to ask that we probably cover these separately just because they're a little more in depth. But I can tell you that we'll follow back up and answer anything. And like I said, if you have follow-on questions, if there's additional detail that you're looking for, or if you just simply want to ask if some more specific detail based on your setup, reach out. We're happy to engage. And whether it's myself or my team and the account executives, we are more than happy to help you out and understand how we can assist you in executing your freight orders a little bit better. So I appreciate the time, everyone, today. Hope to talk to you all very soon, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks so much.